They told you your ego was the problem, that confidence was narcissism, that believing in yourself made you arrogant, so you buried it, while watching people with big egos achieve everything you have ever wanted. But here's what they never told you. Your ego isn't the enemy. It's what shapes your edge, the part of you that sees through the scam of humility, that refuses to shrink so others feel tall, that knows being humble doesn't make you likable. It just makes you forgettable. And while you're killing your ego to stay likable, someone else is using theirs to build empires. So now you have a choice. Keep starving the part of you that wants to rise or finally set it free. This video isn't here to tame your ego. It's here to weaponize it, because a human who knows their worth can't be controlled. Arrogance is a mask, loud, hollow, and desperate to be seen. Ego, on the other hand, is the one behind that mask, quietly watching. You've been told to suppress it, to feel ashamed of it. But why? Because ego is awareness. It's your identity. The quiet whisper that validates your existence in this universe. Without it, you wouldn't even know who you are. You'd be a blank slate, easy to mold and easy to control. The world doesn't demonize the ego because it's dangerous. It does so because a person who owns it can't be controlled. In psychology, the ego is what stands between instinct and reality. It balances the wildness of your desires with the rules of the system. And when used correctly, it becomes your internal compass. It sets boundaries and demands respect. It knows your worth even when no one else does. But most people never learn that. They mistake ego for narcissism, confidence for arrogance, power for pride. And so they bury it. Not because it's flawed, but because it doesn't play by their rules. Because in a world that feeds on obedience, an ego that stands tall is a force to be reckoned with. The biggest mistake you'll ever make is thinking you need permission to be great. So when they couldn't control your ego, they came for your humility. Humility was never about virtue. It was about obedience. From the moment you could speak, you were told to tone it down. Don't brag. Don't ask for too much. Don't make others uncomfortable with your confidence. That wasn't about shaping your character. Instead, it was about shrinking your presence. You weren't being shaped into a better person. You were being trained to stay small. The myth of humility didn't start with kindness. It started with control. Look around you. Religions praised meekness and obedience. Schools rewarded silence. Even workplaces celebrated team players who keep their heads down, speak when spoken to, and never outshine the system. Why? Because humility makes you easier to swallow. Because a person who doesn't recognize their own power will never rebel. They handed you humility like a leash, dressed it up in lies like virtue and character. But every time you felt the urge to rise, to speak, to demand more, that leash tightened. This isn't to say humility has no place. Real humility is chosen. But the version you were handed, that wasn't grounding. It was self-sabotage. And here's the twisted part. The more invisible you became, the more applause you got. Not because they admired you, but because you stopped being a threat. False humility is a prison with velvet walls. It looks soft, noble, even admirable. But quietly, it suffocates your potential. You've seen it. A compliment enters the room and you swat it away before it can touch you. I just got lucky. I'm not really that good. And at first, it earns you praise. Because when you dim your light, others feel safer standing beside you. When you minimize yourself, no one sees you as a threat, and the world responds exactly how you train it to. Managers pass you over, clients hesitate, partners lose respect, not because you lack value, but because you keep erasing the evidence. In a Stanford study, candidates who consistently downplayed their accomplishments were rated as less competent, even when their performance was objectively better. That's the cost of making yourself smaller for applause. Because false humility doesn't just protect other people's egos, it strangles your own. And when the ego withers, humility becomes rot. You stop asking, you stop setting standards, until eventually you mistake silence for strength. And here's the worst part. You don't just convince others that you don't matter. You convince yourself. That voice inside you, once defiant and precise, starts to flicker. The doubt doesn't scream. It seeps in. You start pulling back. And eventually, you start believing they were right. The mask of humility hardens into identity. You become the one who always steps back. The one who always makes space, but never takes it. So here's the truth. Humility without ego isn't grace. It's collapse. Because once you abandon yourself, the world doesn't have to. The ego has been demonized for centuries, painted as the root of pride, conflict, and self-obsession. But that's only part of the story, and frankly, a convenient one. Because when people tell you to kill your ego, they rarely tell you what you're giving up in the process. Think of ego as your psychological immune system. It protects your sense of self from being overrun by outside influences. It lets you move through the world as yourself, not as an echo of everyone else. Without it, you lose clarity. You start to confuse other people's expectations with your own desires. You stop knowing where your boundaries are or that you're even allowed to have them. Ego plays a vital role in how you make decisions. When it's healthy, it doesn't just protect you from being walked over. It gives you a platform to build your values, goals, and identity on. You might hear people say ego is what separates you from others. But that separation isn't a flaw. It's necessary. Because without some form of separation, you lose the ability to choose, to disagree, and to stand firm on your individuality. Psychologically, a damaged ego is linked with things like dissociation, people-pleasing, and even emotional burnout. When the self becomes too porous, you become susceptible to manipulation and self-abandonment. This is where the paradox comes in. You don't need to destroy your ego to grow. You need a strong one to handle growth in the first place. Carl Jung believed ego wasn't something to be eradicated, but integrated. It had to be strong enough to face the deeper layers of the psyche, what he called the shadow. Without a stable ego, the shadow overwhelms you. You're consumed by the very parts of yourself you were never prepared to meet. A strong ego lets you question yourself without falling apart. It lets you face the truth without needing to run. And when it's strong, balanced, and healthy, it gives you the one thing the world is always trying to take from you: your freedom. But knowing that isn't enough. You have to rebuild the ego they trained you to kill. And it starts small, quiet and subtle, just like how they buried it. Step 1. Rewire your self-talk. Every time you say, "I'm just lucky," or "I'm not that good," you're reinforcing the lie they gave you. Replace it, not with delusion, but with precise action. Instead of, "I hope I'm good enough," say, "I've worked for this and I bring value." In cognitive behavioral therapy, this process is called reframing, shifting your internal narrative from fear to fact. Over time, those new statements reshape your self-image at the root. Step 2. Practice confident ownership. Stop apologizing for existing. When someone compliments your work, say, "Thank you," not, "It was nothing." When you succeed, own it. Not to boast, but to reinforce to your subconscious that you belong in that space. Ego feeds on truth. Give it evidence and it grows strong. Step 3. Set boundaries without guilt. Saying no is not selfish. Every time you say no, you don't just set a standard, you protect the self that took you years to build. People with no ego tolerate anything. People with a strong ego choose who gets access and protect their energy and time like it's sacred. Step 4. Visualize the version of you that doesn't shrink. Studies show the brain reacts to visualization almost identically to real-life experience. So close your eyes and see yourself walking into the room with certainty, speaking without apology, standing tall without permission. The more often you see it, the easier it becomes to manifest it into reality. This isn't pretending. This is who you were before the world told you to shrink. Building ego isn't about becoming loud. It's about becoming rooted. So when the world tries to shake you, you no longer move. They say ego is the barrier between you and enlightenment. But the fundamental reality of its existence is what makes you human. Not just flawed, but hungry and conscious. Someone capable of legacy. Without ego, there is no art, no story to be told, no fire to build something that outlives you. It's your ego that makes you want to shape reality, to put your name on something, and to leave a mark in a world that forgets too easily. The monk may silence the ego to feel free, but the visionary uses it to reach the stars. But the world made you look so small you forgot you were made in his image. An existence so holy, even the heavens once bowed to you. You forgot your potential, infinite and ever-expanding, like the universe that breathed you into being. It's not ego that holds you back. It's the relentless push for humility that made you forget your godlike capacity. Because ego at its highest level projects your will into the universe itself. And when you remember that, you stop shrinking. Not out of arrogance, but out of alignment. Because the world doesn't need more people who disappear for the comfort of others. It needs more people who remember who they are and have the courage to become it. Somewhere along the way, you started playing small. But deep down, you knew. It was fear. 1 in 400 trillion. That's the odds of being born as a human. The odds of having a mind that can imagine, a voice that can shape, and a will that can bend reality itself. You weren't given this life to stay small. You were allowed to carve your name into the fabric of the universe itself. Don't take that for granted. Ask yourself, where have you been shrinking when you should have stood tall? Drop it in the comments. Unmask it. And if this video reminded you of the power you buried, subscribe and claim it back.